I felt the room spin when Carla announced Evan, 24, 3 months in, as the new director. People clapped. I didn't. I couldn't. 6 years of perfect metrics, crisis recoveries, and sleepless routing nights. Erased with one sentence. I smiled anyway because that's what they expected from someone they believed was too dependent, too quiet, too safe to fight back. But what they didn't know was that I'd already seen the cracks forming behind their shiny announcement, and I held something they never considered. If you've lived something like this, tell me in the comments, and subscribe for the full story. I didn't walk into Redwood Apex looking for ambition. I walked in looking for survival. After my marriage collapsed, after years of carrying a man who never carried me back, I needed something stable, something that wouldn't disappear overnight the way promises do. Logistics wasn't glamorous, but it was predictable, and predictable was a luxury when you're raising a 12-year-old on your own. My son Leo used to sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I logged late-night routing checks. He'd glance at me over his worksheets and say, "Mom, you're working again?" I'd smile, tell him I was building a better future, even though I wasn't sure he believed it. But I did. I believed if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. Someone would reward it. Someone would finally say, "You're ready." Carla Hensley certainly made it sound that way. For 6 years, she called me her rock, her steady hand, the one who could calm a freight bottleneck with a spreadsheet and a phone call. When winter storms shut down half the Northwest Corridor, I was the one coordinating backup drivers, rerouting shipments, smoothing out screaming clients. Carla would pat my shoulder and say, "Lilith, you're the backbone of this division." Every year during performance reviews, she'd give me the same smile, the kind older women in management use when they're pretending to mentor you while making sure you don't rise too fast. "Just a little more time," she'd say. "The company is restructuring. You're absolutely next in line." Next in line became a mantra I repeated to myself while staying late, while handling emergencies, while covering for managers who bailed early to catch flights or beat weekend traffic. Even when I sat in my car at 9:30 p.m. some nights, exhausted and half frozen, telling myself that good things come to people who don't give up. The truth? I wanted that director role not because of the title, not even because of the salary bump, but because it felt like the first thing in years I had earned for myself. Something no one could take away, or so I thought. Looking back, I can see the signs so clearly it feels embarrassing I ever trusted them. The sudden shift in whose meetings I was invited to, the way Carla began asking me to prepare notes for her son to review, even before Evan technically worked there, the way she told me to start documenting more thoroughly with this vague, "for your eventual transition upward" explanation. She spoke as if she were grooming me for promotion, but her eyes kept drifting toward the door anytime Evan walked past, like he was the true audience she was performing for. Still, I brushed off the unease because that's what single mothers do. We keep moving. We assume paranoia is just fatigue talking. We tell ourselves nobody would ever be bold enough to steal a woman's career right out from under her. But Redwood Apex wasn't built on fairness. It was built on quiet deals behind conference room doors, and I was too busy being grateful for the chance to start over to see that the ladder they said I was climbing wasn't connected to anything at all. I didn't know it then, but every late night, every crisis solved, every compliment Carla handed me, it was all setting the stage for the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break trust. It breaks something much deeper, and I was walking straight toward it without realizing I should have been running the other way. Evan walked into Redwood Apex on a rainy Monday morning, wearing a tailored jacket that still had the store creases and a smile that belonged to someone who'd never been told no in his life. Carla introduced him like he was a visiting dignitary instead of her 24-year-old son, who'd spent the previous year finding himself by hopping between temp jobs and weekend ski trips. "My son will be shadowing our operations to understand the full scope of what we do," she announced, like the rest of us had been waiting for this revelation. People nodded politely, the way you nod at someone's dog when it jumps up on your leg. I offered a handshake because professionalism is a reflex for me, and he gripped my hand too lightly, like he didn't want to commit to even that level of effort. His desk was placed directly across from mine, close enough that I could hear every time he opened a soda or watched another sports highlight on his second monitor. Carla insisted it was temporary, just until he learned the basics. I didn't question it out loud, but something about the arrangement felt off from the start. He didn't ease in. He intruded. When I was on client calls, he hovered beside me with a notebook he barely wrote in, asking questions that didn't connect to anything I just explained. He mixed up carrier contracts with warehouse invoices. He confused estimated transit windows with fuel surcharge schedules. He would nod like he understood, then ask again the following day as if we'd never discussed it. Still, I tried. I really tried. I told myself everyone has a learning curve. I reminded myself how nervous I had been on my first day in logistics. But Evan wasn't nervous. He was entitled, and entitlement doesn't learn, it expects the world to adjust. Some afternoons, he'd stroll into meetings late, sitting beside Carla as though he'd earned the seat through merit rather than heredity. She'd beam at him, proud, while the rest of us exchanged quick glances that said what nobody dared voice. This wasn't training, this was positioning. He inserted himself into conversations he didn't understand, giving solutions that created more problems than they fixed. Once, during a routing review, he suggested just shifting deliveries to the next day as if our clients weren't operating on precise production schedules. When I gently explained why that wouldn't work, he shrugged and said, "Well, Mom can figure it out." Mom, not Carla, not the director. Mom. And just like that, the mask slipped. Everything made sense in a single moment of clarity so sharp it almost hurt. Evan wasn't learning the job. He was being walked toward it. Every document Carla asked me to prepare for context, every report she requested in summaries, suitable for broader review, every leadership meeting I was suddenly left out of, it all snapped into a clean picture. Still, even then, I didn't imagine she would replace me with him outright. I thought maybe she wanted him to understand the operation so he could support her. I thought maybe she wanted me to supervise him someday. I was naive enough to hope for fairness, but fairness has no home in places where bloodlines outrank resumes. Evan didn't steal opportunities, he absorbed them by simply existing in the right family. And every day he sat across from me, spinning in his chair while I put out fires he didn't know existed, I felt the slow, creeping sense that I was being quietly erased, one small oversight at a time, one ignored effort after another, until the day would come when no one even remembered what I had built. The signs were there. I just didn't want to believe they pointed exactly where they eventually led. The morning everything shattered began like any other. Coffee that tasted burnt, inbox overflowing, the usual scramble to stabilize shipments delayed by a fog bank rolling over the Columbia River. Evan was already in the conference room, sitting beside Carla, flipping through a presentation he clearly didn't create. I walked in with my notes, unaware that my future had already been decided behind closed doors. My teammates greeted me with polite nods, though something in their eyes felt off, like pity wrapped in professionalism. I brushed it aside. The agenda said we were reviewing the new leadership structure for the upcoming fiscal year, something I had prepared extensive transition strategies for. After 6 years of being told I was next in line, I allowed myself to hope. Not brag, not assume, just hope. Carla stood at the front of the room, clearing her throat with that rehearsed seriousness she used whenever she wanted to impress corporate. Thank you all for joining. Today we're announcing Redwood Apex's new Systems Optimization Director. My heart thudded once, hard, like it wanted to leap into my throat. She smiled, but not at me. Please join me in congratulating Evan Hensley on stepping into this critical role. The words didn't hit me all at once. They landed slowly like hailstones, each one harder than the last. Evan straightened his jacket, pretending humility, but the smug lift at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. The room clapped. Not enthusiastically, just mechanically. People clap when they're told to clap. That sound felt like betrayal disguised as applause. I forced my hands together once, twice. The motion felt foreign, like my body was rejecting the lie I was participating in. Carla beamed, proud mother masquerading as objective leader. Evan has shown tremendous potential, she continued, glancing only briefly in my direction. And Lilith has done an exceptional job preparing our processes to make his transition seamless. My stomach dropped. Prepare our processes, make his transition seamless. She spoke as if my years of structuring complex routing systems were nothing more than warm-up drills for her son's big moment. I felt every set of eyes flick to me, checking my reaction like spectators waiting for a crack in a dam. I didn't give them one, not yet. Evan stood, clearing his throat in that overeager way of his. "I'm excited to take on this challenge," he said, voice a little too loud. "Mom, Carla has given me so much confidence and I'm grateful for the team's support." Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Evan continued, oblivious. "I've been observing the workflows closely, and I think with some innovation and energy we can really modernize things." Modernize. That word came straight from Carla's mouth, repackaged in his. I stared at the table, jaw tight. 6 years of 14-hour days, 6 years of crisis control, 6 years of doing the job without the title. And they gave it to a kid who still mixed up delivery lead times with carrier availability, but the humiliation wasn't finished. Carla looked directly at me. "And Lilith, I expect you'll continue providing Evan with the insight and support he needs during this transition period. Your experience is invaluable." That was the dagger. She wanted me to train him. She wanted me to build his competence the same way I'd built the entire operation spine of this division. Yet she couldn't say my name without reducing me to a stepping stone. Something inside me went still. Not empty, quiet. A chilling, crystalline silence that came from a truth forming in the pit of my stomach. I was done being grateful for scraps. I was done believing in promises meant to keep me obedient. I scanned the room, noting the look on my coworkers' faces. Not pride for Evan, not respect, but resignation. Everyone knew this had been predetermined. Everyone knew the director role had never been mine to earn. I was the only one who didn't see it until this moment. When the meeting ended, people approached Evan with handshakes and hollow congratulations. Carla lingered, waiting for my reaction like a hunter, waiting to see if its prey would run or freeze. I gathered my folder calmly, every movement controlled, deliberate. "We'll talk more this week," she said softly, patronizingly. "I know you understand why this decision was made." I lifted my eyes to hers, and for the first time since joining Redwood Apex, I saw her without the mask. Calculating, dismissive, already writing me out of the story. "Oh," I said quietly, "I understand perfectly." She smiled, thinking she'd won. She had no idea she'd just awakened the part of me that didn't break, only sharpened. I didn't go back to my desk right away after the meeting. I needed a minute, just one, to breathe and make sure my hands weren't shaking. Carla thought I'd swallow the humiliation and return to my cubicle like a loyal workhorse. Evan thought I'd congratulate him, maybe offer to grab lunch so we could align. Neither of them expected me to walk down the hallway toward the break room, trying to ground myself before I said something I couldn't take back. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found me anyway. As I passed the corridor near Carla's office, I heard voices, low, hurried, familiar. The door was cracked. I didn't mean to stop, but the words pulled me in before I could think. "You're sure she won't cause issues?" The voice belonged to Mark Benson, one of the senior corporate auditors who flew in whenever Redwood Apex needed to justify budget overruns. Carla sighed like the question annoyed her. "Lilith won't make waves. She's dependable, stable. Single moms don't gamble with their income." My heart slammed against my ribs. Single moms, that's all I was to her. A woman with obligations she could weaponize. Mark lowered his voice. "But operationally, are you certain Evan can handle the workload?" Carla laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl. "He'll be fine. Lilith's been doing the work for years. She'll keep everything together until he figures it out." A pause. Then, "And if she leaves?" Carla didn't even hesitate. "She won't. People like her don't quit." People like her. My fingers curled into fists. She kept going. "Besides, she's not leadership material. She's good at the grunt work, not the vision. Evan has the degree, the confidence, the potential. The board wants someone dynamic. She's predictable." predictable. That was the moment something inside me snapped in a way that didn't feel loud. It felt like a wire tightening, silent and irreversible. Mark cleared his throat. Well, the board will want results quickly. The freight delays in Spokane, the carrier turnover. Lilith will take care of it. Carla cut in. She always does. She's loyal to a fault. It's why we've kept her where she is. Kept her where she is. They weren't promoting me because of restructuring or timing or budgets. They were keeping me small on purpose, too competent to lose, too useful to advance, too bound by responsibility to resist. And they honestly believed I'd just stay there, quiet, grateful, obedient, propping up their careers with my labor. Every late night, every holiday I worked through, every crisis I handled alone. None of it ever put me next in line. It only made me easier to exploit. I stepped back before they could hear me breathing, forcing my expression neutral as I slipped down the hall. The office lights buzzed faintly overhead, and everything around me suddenly felt wrong, like seeing a familiar room from a new angle, and realizing you'd been standing in the weakest spot all along. When I reached my desk, Evan looked up and smiled, oblivious. "Mom wants you to send me the vendor transition packet," he said. "She said you probably already finished it." Of course she did. I opened my laptop without replying, not because I planned to send him anything, but because I needed to look busy while my mind processed what I now understood. Carla didn't just overlook me, she built a system where I couldn't rise. She needed me beneath her son to keep him afloat. They assumed my quiet meant acceptance. They thought my loyalty meant blindness. They believed my responsibilities meant weakness. They were wrong on all three. As I typed nothing on my keyboard, letting the blank document glow back at me, a strange calm settled over my shoulders. Not rage, clarity. I finally saw the truth, sharp as broken glass. I wasn't trapped, I was done. And they had no idea how quickly everything they built on my back was about to crumble once I stepped away. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was spiraling, but because for the first time in years, my mind was quiet enough for truth to fill the space where denial used to live. I lay awake thinking about Leo, about the nights he'd fall asleep on the couch waiting for me to come home, about the dinners I'd rush through, about the vacations we postponed because freight backlogs couldn't wait. All for a company that saw me as a safety net, not a leader. By morning, the decision felt inevitable. I walked into the office with a clarity I'd never experienced before. Evan greeted me cheerfully, clueless as always, but I didn't even slow down. I typed my letter with steady fingers, each sentence a clean break from the years I had spent shrinking myself to fit Carla's expectations. When I finished, I printed it on the noisy old machine by reception. The sound of the pages sliding out felt like applause only I could hear. I waited until 4:30 p.m. when the office quieted and Carla's guard was down. She'd been parading Evan around the warehouse, introducing him to supervisors with that same rehearsed enthusiasm she'd once used. On me. I knocked on her office door and she waved me in without looking up, assuming I was there for some routine update. "What is it, Lilith?" she asked, still scrolling through her emails. I placed the envelope on her desk. "My 2 weeks' notice." She froze, then blinked, then let out a small, incredulous laugh as if I were telling a joke in poor taste. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm resigning," I repeated. Her smile flattened, replaced by confusion and the faintest outline of panic. This is because of Evan?" I didn't reply. Silence made her nervous, so she filled it. "Lilith, be reasonable. You're upset, I understand that. But walking away from the stability you have here? From a job you're good at? That's impulsive." "No," I said, "it's overdue." She stood abruptly, pacing behind her desk like the motion could keep control from slipping through her fingers. "Think about your son, Lilith. Think about your responsibilities. You can't just gamble with your income." There it was, the leverage she always assumed she had. My responsibilities, my motherhood, my supposed fear of losing stability. "I'm not gambling," I said quietly. "I'm choosing." Her expression hardened. "You leave like this, and I can't promise you a positive reference." as if a woman who spent years holding me down could define my future. "That's your choice," I replied. "But I'm leaving regardless." She sat back down, her tone shifting into condescension so smooth it almost sounded caring. "Look, Evan brings new energy, fresh ideas, you know that. He represents the future. You represent experience and steadiness. There's room for both of you if you stay." Experience and steadiness was her coded way of saying reliable but undeserving. Background character. Permanent supporting role. "I appreciate the clarity," I said with a calm that unsettled even me. Carla exhaled sharply. "Don't do this. Take the weekend. Come back Monday and we'll pretend this conversation never happened." She genuinely believed I'd break, that I'd crawl back, because fear had always been her most effective tool. But fear loses power once you recognize who actually needs whom. I stood. "I'll finish my 2 weeks. I'll keep everything running for the sake of the team. But after that, I'm gone." She rose too, anger beginning to surface under her carefully pressed professionalism. "You're making a mistake, Lilith, a big one." I reached the door, pausing just long enough to let my words land. "Maybe," I said, "but it's mine to make." She didn't know it yet, but my departure wasn't the mistake she needed to worry about. The real disaster was the son she had just handed my entire workload to, and the empire she'd built on the assumption that I'd never walk away from it. Monday morning I arrived early out of habit, though I felt strangely like a visitor walking through a place that no longer owned any part of me. The air in the office felt heavier, stretched thin with the pressure of everything Evan didn't understand yet. He was already at his desk, surrounded by 3 monitors covered in spreadsheets he clearly couldn't decipher. His eyes were wide, desperate in a way I hadn't seen before. "Lilith, thank God," he blurted the moment he saw me. "Riverbend Fabrication emailed saying they're escalating an issue to corporate because of some routing delay, and I don't even know which supplier they're talking about." It took everything in me not to let satisfaction show. This wasn't his fault, not really. It was Carla's for throwing him into a job he had no business holding. Still, the consequences were here now, gathering fast. I kept my voice steady. "Show me the email." What he had pulled up wasn't even the correct thread. He was reading something from 2 months ago, dated before he even joined. I navigated to the real message myself. The error was obvious. A missed transfer window from our Spokane cross dock, one that Evan should have flagged last week but didn't know existed. I spent the next 3 hours cleaning up the mess, calling carriers, smoothing over Riverbend's frustrations, rebooking a last-minute expedited haul that cost Redwood Apex more than I wanted to admit. Evan watched, taking frantic notes that made no sense. He didn't know the difference between a layover fee and a detention charge. When I finished, he exhaled hard, like he'd survived a disaster he couldn't quite name. "How do you keep all this in your head?" he asked. "Experience," I said, though the real answer was survival. By noon, 3 more clients called with variations of the same concern. Inconsistency, delays, wrong point of contact. Word travels fast in logistics, faster than anyone at Redwood Apex seemed to realize, and without someone steering the ship, the currents turn ruthless. By Wednesday, Carla's office door was closed more often than open. Her voice, usually crisp and composed, started cracking sharp on calls she thought no one could hear. People avoided the hallway near her door, the way animals give wide berth to a storm before it hits. That afternoon, she summoned me. Not with an email, not with a polite knock. She appeared at my desk the way someone appears when their world is sliding out from under them. "I need you," she said in a voice stripped of pride. "Just for a bit longer. Evan is adjusting and corporate is breathing down my neck about the delays." "I'm finishing my notice," I interrupted gently. "I told you I would." Her jaw tightened. "You're abandoning your team." It wasn't my team anymore. I had carried it long enough that she forgot it wasn't mine to begin with. "They'll adapt," I said. "Evan will too." But we both knew the truth. Evan wasn't adapting. He was drowning and the water level was rising. By Friday, an email hit the company-wide inbox. Copper Trail Robotics was suspending their annual contract pending review of operational inconsistencies. A year ago, I'd saved that partnership from collapse. Now it was collapsing again, this time with no one left to rescue it. I walked out at 5 p.m., leaving my badge on Carla's desk per HR protocol. She didn't look up when I placed it there. She just stared at her monitor, expression blank, as if she finally understood the math she'd never bothered to calculate. Everything she thought I needed from Redwood Apex was actually everything the company needed from me. And tomorrow, for the first time in 6 years, they wouldn't have it. Leaving Redwood Apex felt less like quitting a job and more like stepping out of a burning building just before the roof gave way. The silence of my first Monday away was strange, almost unnerving. No pre-dawn alerts, no crisis emails, no frantic calls asking me to just take a quick look. I dropped Leo off at school without checking my phone every 3 minutes. I drove to my interview at Evergreen Freight Solutions with a calmness I hadn't felt since my 20s. Tom, the regional VP, greeted me like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I've heard a lot about you," he said, and for once it wasn't from someone trying to extract more free labor out of me. Evergreen had been courting me quietly for months, but I'd been too loyal, too tied up in the fantasy that hard work would eventually pay off, to take them seriously. Now, sitting across from Tom with a resume full of crisis management and system overhauls, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. By the end of the interview, the offer was on the table. Systems Integration Director, 28% higher salary than Redwood Apex, flexible hours, remote days, a team of my own. When I accepted, Tom smiled like he already knew the ripple effect this would have on the industry. "We've been trying to break into the Northwest Manufacturing Corridor," he said. "Your relationships could be key." I didn't poach anyone. I didn't have to. When clients heard I moved, they found their way to me on their own. People who valued expertise, not last names. A month in, 3 major accounts had already transitioned to Evergreen, not because I asked, but because they trusted me more than the chaos they'd been dealing with since I left. The real fallout hit 6 months later. Tom walked into my office holding a business magazine with a grin that told me something big was inside. "You'll want to read this," he said, sliding it across my desk. The headline nearly swallowed the entire cover. "Redwood Apex Northwest Division collapses under mismanagement. Nepotism investigation underway." My breath caught just slightly, not from surprise but from recognition. The article detailed everything I had predicted the day Carla placed her son in a role he couldn't handle. Freight bottlenecks, missed deadlines, penalties from Riverbend Fabrication, Copper Trail Robotics, and Cascade Metals. A 72% revenue drop in the division I'd helped keep afloat for years, and then a sentence that almost made me laugh. Sources confirm that the former lead architect, who resigned shortly before the collapse, had been responsible for stabilizing over 80% of the region's operational flow. They didn't say my name, but they didn't need to. Carla, according to the report, had been terminated after an internal audit revealed she misrepresented Evan's qualifications to corporate. Evan resigned quietly a week later. The board called it restructuring. Everyone else called it what it was: consequences. 3 weeks after the article came out, I stopped at a cafe near the university while running errands. That's where I saw him, Evan, sitting alone with a laptop and a stack of textbooks. He looked different, older, humbled. When he glanced up and recognized me, he hesitated, then offered a small, sheepish smile. "Lilith," he said, Can I say something?" I nodded, mostly out of curiosity. He exhaled. "I wasn't ready for any of it. I thought I could figure it out, but I didn't understand how much you were actually doing." I let him talk. He needed to. "I'm back in school," he continued. "Supply chain program, trying to actually learn this stuff the right way." I studied him for a moment, surprised by the sincerity. "That's good," I said. "It'll serve you better long term." He nodded. "I'm sorry for how everything happened. You deserved that role, not me." For the first time, the truth came from someone who had benefited from the lie. It didn't undo what happened, but it closed a door I hadn't realized was still cracked open. I paid for my coffee and stood to leave. "Good luck, Evan," I said, and meant it. As I walked out into the late afternoon sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Not because Redwood Apex fell apart, not because Carla lost her position, but because I had built a future that no one could steal, diminish, or rewrite. A future I walked toward on my own terms. In the end, my revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was simple. I succeeded somewhere they couldn't follow. And sometimes, that's all the justice life needs. Sometimes the hardest lesson I've had to learn is that loyalty means nothing in the wrong hands. I spent years believing that if I showed up, worked harder than anyone else, and proved myself over and over, someone would eventually acknowledge my worth. But life doesn't work like that. Not in corporate America, not in relationships, not anywhere power gets comfortable exploiting quiet people. What happened to me at Redwood Apex wasn't just about nepotism or a stolen promotion. It was about waking up to the truth that staying in places where you're undervalued slowly conditions you to shrink, to accept crumbs, to call deprivation stability. The moment I walked away wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the voice I'd muted for too long. And the collapse that followed wasn't victory. It was simply the natural end to a structure built on denial, favoritism, and the assumption that people like me would never leave. If there's a lesson my story carries, it's this: know your worth before someone else prices you at a discount. Don't wait for permission to outgrow environments that benefit from your silence. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. In your own life, ask yourself, where are you staying out of habit instead of hope? Where are you giving more than you're receiving? Where have you convinced yourself that next time will be different when all the patterns say otherwise? You don't owe your potential to anyone who hasn't earned it. You don't have to burn bridges. Just stop building them stronger than the people walking across them. How to get started today. Write down 3 places in your life where you feel undervalued. Choose one small boundary you will set this week, just one. Reach out to someone who sees your worth and ask for their honest perspective. Update one part of your resume, portfolio, or goals list. Remind yourself what you bring to the table. If this story hit home for you, tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to share, subscribe, and stay with us for the next chapter.